welcome friends. Welcome to Investment Immigration Conversations. I'm your host, Carolyn Lee, principal and founder of Carolyn Lee PLLC, a U.S. investment immigration law firm dedicated to helping clients build their futures with investment immigration. And I am a little late logging in this afternoon because Suzanne and we're just witzing about the statistics and the state of play in EB-5 and giggling and having a good old time and not looking at the clock. So Suzanne Lizicki, you truly need no introduction, but Suzanne, welcome to Investment Immigration Conversations again. You're one of our favorite guests.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And a brief word about Suzanne for anybody who's just coming into the EB-5 space or has been in EB-5 but under a rock. Suzanne, you've emerged into prominence in the most beautiful way because it's been so quiet and subtle and completely based on substance and on being a resource to the industry and bringing, I think, hands down, the highest quality data and information that we have in the EB-5 space. And I think that's saying a lot. Lizicki is by trade a business plan writer with an MBA who has written countless business plans for EB-5s, for regional center-based offerings, as well as for direct EB-5s. Her practice also includes business plan writing for E2s and Ls as well. And she observes, researches, analyzes, and writes about EB-5, largely, most recently, and notably in crunching numbers, which has been so important for us because it's a zero-sum game. We have a limited number of EB-5 visas that are allocated every year, and we have a demand that exceeds that.
And I think it's so important both for investor decisions and for developer and regional center decisions, just because the numbers determine the wait times for being able to immigrate for investors, and then for projects, it really helps shape the size of their market and the duration of the market. Is how long is this investment immigration opportunity going to be available, considering the number of visas we have available to incentivize investments?
Oh, totally. And I think what I really love about the information revolution that you've helped herald, Suzanne, is that there is transparency about what we do know, but also about what we don't know. There's a lot of misinformation and complexity out there, not just in EB-5, but in all things. But to be able to articulate, what the raw data is, what it shows, what we can infer, what it doesn't show, what we don't have any basis for solid conclusions on. I think that's truly equally, if not more valuable. So I bow to you. Thank you. I know this makes you profoundly uncomfortable because you're very, very humble as well to add to your list of perfect qualities. All right. So what I thought we would do is, of course, cover what's going on in our space. What are the big questions? Where are we? We're a quarter away from the grandfathering sunset. So I think we should talk a little bit about that and what that all means and what we're hearing in terms of questions from folks. Just got back from San Diego, the annual AILA conference, where I spoke at the only panel on EB-5, 8 a.m., kind of screeched in there. So, of course, grandfathering was the biggest topic that we covered, along with denials without RFEs, partial cases, litigation, and briefly at the end, distressed investors in subparagraph M and the 180-day notices that so many investors received in the last few months and responded to. So, Suzanne, I do have a plan. I want to walk through your Q1 fiscal 2026 data page, which I just really think is like the entire story about where we are right now, where we've been, and the best peek at where we're going. But before we get there, I mean, where do you think we are in EB-5 right now? Year 4 into RIA, a quarter away from grandfathering sunset. What are your thoughts, concerns, questions?
Well, EB-5 is immigrant investment, so I'm always wondering, are both sides of those working out? Where are we with the amount of investment that's coming in? Where is it going? And then on the immigration side, are people able to use this category to immigrate? Is the immigration process working smoothly? And as far as the investment side, it seems to be going very well. If we take those numbers for I-526 filings and multiply them by 800,000, we come up with almost $6 billion in EB-5 investment through high unemployment and rural. Yes, B. So even up through the end of last year, $2 billion in high unemployment, $3 billion in rural. That is a lot of money coming in. That is a lot of jobs being created. So that's great. And as far as the immigration angle, what worries me is that, number one, at least through the end of last year, there just wasn't much visa issuance in rural and high unemployment. One thing I'm very curious to quiz you on is what you're seeing this year as far as, is the queue moving along? Are visas actually getting issued in rural and high unemployment? Because that's so important. And then just looking at the volume of investors coming in and looking at the number of visas that are going to be available to them, we are once again looking at a big imbalance between the number of people in line, the number of visas available, and also just within last year, which we now have data for all of last year for people coming in, it's 4 to 5 times the number of people who could get visas in a given normal year. And so that pace is not sustainable, and that's something to consider going forward.
Whoa, yeah. So just to recap, the investment side of things and the job creation side of things, the lift to the economy, those are there. And how is the immigration portion faring? I must say, from my standpoint, I think it is working. Could it work better? Always, 100%. But our clients are getting 526E approvals, 485 approvals as well. And we will talk about the May 22nd memo. And so, could it be faster? I mean, rurals are pretty fast. Adjustments. I mean, and also everything is contextual. I remember it must now be a decade and a half ago or so. Adjustments were taking 24 plus months. So now they're taking about 12. I mean, it doesn't feel awful right now. And
One
that's
thing
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go.
On status adjustment, just looking at the monthly inventory reports, it looks as if there might be almost, that the volume of EB-5 adjustments might be almost double what it was last year at this time. I wonder, which would be good because that's what we need to have in the set-aside categories. Last year, they issued only about half the set-aside visas they had available. So they'd have to double their volume this year in order to actually get close to using this year's visas. Adjustment of status looks like they might be on track. Consular processing, I have no idea from the data, but I don't know what you're seeing or hearing anecdotally as far as how volumes are looking both for status adjustment and consular processing in EB-5.
We are now developing in our house the capacity to crunch these numbers and inventory much more accurately. So in our next conversations, I'll try to present some of our in-house information. But anecdotally, the adjustments are coming through. there is adjudication, and consular processing much much more episodic, much less of a flow, but that's also not not unusual. I mean, a few years ago when we were, talking about concurrent adjustment of status filings and the capacity at the consulates versus the capacity at USCIS to
Right.
process, yeah, to process DS-260 applications versus adjustment of status applications. The State Department at folks were telling us you want more adjustments because USCIS just has far, far more capacity 45 applications than we have to chunk through DS-260s. And I think that's true, which is why I was a little bit puzzled or surprised by some of the adjustment numbers that you reported. But I think that, and I'll be very, very interested with you to monitor those numbers, Suzanne, because um, yes, so USCIS has far greater capacity to adjudicate 485s than consulates do DS-260s worldwide. But with the May 22nd adjustment of status memo and the restrictive tone and environment of which that speaks, how is that going to affect the flow of 485 adjudications? And also, what are our benchmarks? To what should we be comparing the flow of 485s in the employment-based categories specifically? So, yeah, I mean, again, I think in our experience, in our practices experience, it's flowing, it's working.
Hmm.
Immigration side of the equation is working.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it is. It
And
truly
you
is.
would say uh, with respect to volumes, and then also what about approvals versus denials? Uh,
Yes. So in our office, we have had one post-RIA denial, 526E denial. And that case related to a mandamus and RFEs. And then I think it went from an RFE, no noid, to a denial based on reasons not provided in the RFE.
hmm.
Things like tax filings that the client had.
Mm,
If we had gotten the RFE that asked for the items that the denial was based on, the case would have been approved.
right.
Completely unlawful.
Hmm.
We are fighting this pro bono at our cost.
Hmm.
We filed a 290B, an appeal, administrative appeal. We're letting that ripen a bit and giving the agencies the opportunity to correct on this, miscarriage of justice. And we'll take it to district court thereafter, after exhaustion. So there is, clearly caprice, as there always was from time to time. But this 20% denial notice, I think, is extremely concerning. And I have some theories about what it all boils down to and what it means. But Suzanne, what do you think it means? So you reported, should I share the screen? I'm going to.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm talking about this page. If you go to Suzanne's blog and you navigate to the tab in the gray bar under EB-5 statistics, and this is where Suzanne posts her reporting on statistics and her analyses. So the latest is fiscal 2026, first quarter EB-5 receipts and processing data. And here we see, these are all of our EB-5 benefits, 526s, 829s, 956s, and we see the 526Es, and we've got 764 approvals and 176 denials. And if that math comes out to about 19% denials.
Yeah. By the way, I can't see your screen.
Oh, you can't see my
Yeah.
screen? Okay, wait a minute. All right. So this is the page I'm speaking of, Suzanne's blog. And then you go to EB-5 statistics, the gray bar there. And then the latest is Q1 statistics for fiscal 2026. And Suzanne is reporting USCIS data on receipts culled by EB-5 benefits. And right now we're talking about 526Es. And we have 764 approved and 176 denied. That pencils out to about 19% denial rate. I don't recall it ever being this high for 526s. So what's going on?
I would say, first of all, that some kind of denial rate above 10% has been common. To me, in previous quarters, when I-526E was only like 5 or 6% denial rate, in my mind, I'm thinking, what's going on? Especially with there are projects being denied, but then not seeing I-526 denials. I have been expecting for the other shoe to drop and finally for them to start showing some denials. So
Right,
to
me
me,
too.
this is partly just expected after many quarters of very low denial rates. I think maybe during those many quarters, there were people responding to their notices of intent to deny. There were projects that got a denial, but they were going through the appeal process, so they didn't deny the investors. So
Right.
now I think maybe just in this quarter, the shoe is starting to drop on those projects that were getting denied. As far as what's a normal denial rate in EB-5, I just did a little calculation for this is an average from 2023 to 2019, which were,
Yeah.
more or
20,
less normal years in EB-5. The average denial rate in that 14% of the petitions processed in that period were denied.
13%. Okay.
Yeah.
For some
So,
reason, 19 to 14 feels big.
uh, yeah, I would say that's
Like one in five.
that's getting up there, but 15% would not be surprising to me.
For
So I would
context,
say
yeah.
it's not huge. And then also when I hear lawyers talk, I feel like I'm always hearing lawyers complain about the RFEs they've been getting and so on. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you're also seeing that they're denying some things now that they didn't deny in the past. Are you seeing that?
Well, right. So from where I stand and looking out and hearing and reading also notices that get sent to our office, um, I think that, you come out of the gate with RIA in 2022. And I think that there were, experiments. And I mean, the delta from 500 to 800 plus, that's a big jump. And I think there were, could we do this? Could we do that? Could we try this? Could we try that? And I think that with those, more creative strategies, one can be lulled into a sense of, okay, that works. Approvals,
Mm,
approvals, approvals. And then, no, it doesn't work anymore. And sometimes it's the decision, the service's decision is well grounded in the law, and other times not. And an example of, when it's not would be the indebtedness denials. Those are the cases where there were hundreds of cases, I attested to, our firm having, hundreds of these cases approved where the source of funds involved in a loan, essentially, up the chain. And the loan might have been secured or collateralized by property that the petitioner didn't own, for example, parents or grandparents, or only owned a part, for example, a third with parents. And it's perfectly permissible in, compliant with EB-5 law and duly approved, and all of a sudden they weren't. And eventually that line of decisions was reversed in federal district court litigation. So, there's that. And then there's also sort of, as you're kind of saying, Suzanne, the service and examiners catching up to trends and structures. So I think it's both.
Right. And in the past, I've been able, or I have told people that I think if you're working with experienced service providers and especially an experienced immigration lawyer, they'll be able to predict in advance the likelihood that your petition will be denied. They can tell you if there's something about this that might be questionable, or if this is, very middle of the road, no reason why this shouldn't be approved. Do you think that's still the case? Or would you advise people that, we can do our best, but we just don't know how the Immigration Service is going to review this?
I mean, I think this is where sort of the philosophies and practices of different practitioners may come into play. I mean, my own approach has always been, I was about to use the word conservative, but I don't think that's correct. I think the word is grounded in the law,
Hmm.
you know? Because if it's grounded in the law, then we can, like this denial, we'll defend it till the cows come home and then the day after. Um, so, I've been so focused on mastery. What does the law actually say? How should this be interpreted? What's the best interpretation? What do the regulations say? How do the regulations interplay and add to and put the gloss on the statute, the policy manual, how it fills the gaps, and the ambiguities and the uncertainties that those sort of supporting guidelines create. No, they're supposed to gap fill, but often they create additional uncertainties and ambiguities, or often make up new law that it oughtn't. I think redeployment is a good example of that. Before that concept was more robustly codified in the RIA. So that's been my personal approach is, what does the law say? And when I'm looking at or asked about, well, what do you think about this, using these devices and these more exotic, meaning less frequently used traditionally forms for source of funds, that's the grill through which I put those facts and those structures. And often I do think that just doesn't work. I've also seen in that similar mechanism, the regional center-based loans for partial cases or even fully funded cases with that component. I have advised regional centers and funds on structuring those deals. I think they can be properly structured, consistent with the authorities, but I've also seen some pretty alarming structures that I was like, no, that's a straight up Izumi violation. So that's, the law, got to know the law.
Right. So if there is a given investor who says, oh no, look at that 20% denial rate on I-526 in that report, does that mean that my petition is more likely to get denied than it was before? If you prepared their petition and you, at the time you prepared it, thought there's nothing that's really questionable here as far as the source of funds, the project was approved, I don't see anything that will raise any questions. Would you say that person should be a little more worried about the denial potential looking at the overall denial rate?
I do.
Or would you tell them, okay?
I do, Suzanne, because I also think that what this number tells us in context to everything else, the May 22nd memo, the, pause on 75, and, there's no question. This is just a much more restrictive immigration environment. No
Hmm.
surprise. And so in that environment, there is heightened risk. But frankly, I don't not welcome it.
Mm-hmm.
This might sound like an odd thing to say from an immigration attorney, but it's an opportunity to show the value of that careful, law-grounded approach. And by the way, one can't execute on that lawful, on that careful, law-grounded approach in 2 weeks, usually.
Right.
And so it's not like choosing an avocado. It's about crafting that winnable case so that it withstands a tougher environment.
Right. And speaking of the tough environment, another thing I mentioned that is sort of new this year is the number of administrative appeals office decisions that are coming out. So I can see a lot of people have been appealing their denials to the AAO, and the AAO is agreeing with a lot of the arguments that said this denial was not fair and sending the cases back to USCIS for another look. So that's interesting.
And that's how it should work. Look, everyone is doing his or her best at every level, in every corner. Examiners are doing their best with the resources they have, but sometimes they get it wrong, as we all do. And so, and that is the job of the AAO to really know, and they have de novo review. They have to have mastery over the law, and they have to look at the facts presented in a fair manner. And so I hadn't tuned into the AAO decisions, but thank you for reporting that, Suzanne. That's very encouraging.
And it is interesting because I've watched AAO decisions back to 2006. Very few, mostly appeals have been dismissed up until this year. This year, there are a lot that they're saying, okay, go back, take a second look.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, good. Good, good, good. And if I were at IPO, I would welcome that as well, to get some guidance from, a higher authority. All right. So that's that. Anything else pop out to you, Suzanne, in these receipts, the data on receipts?
One thing that worries me a little bit, because I work with direct EB-5 business plans, is that they have really been processing a very low volume of direct EB-5 recently and denying a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this is just a workflow issue and that they'll be shortly starting to work on a higher volume of direct EB-5s. But it's also just a reminder to be really careful with the direct EB-5 filings, because they're very different from regional center, and the Immigration Service is apparently finding a lot of reasons to deny ones that have been filed.
Yes. I feel I don't want to sound like we're tooting our horn too much, but we're having good luck with direct 526 cases. I mean, again, really tightly constructed. So hopefully, it's not, don't interpret this as a no, but most definitely they're very, very, very different from regional center based cases. The business plan is also extremely important.
Yes. And here, I think this is one area where I really can predict, just based on experience, is there going to be anything about this business plan that's going to be questionable for direct EB-5? And there are a lot of pitfalls to watch out for and plan to avoid in advance, but I think it is possible to plan to avoid them.
Yes, 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 yes. So, there's other, I sort of see that as, based on experience, another sort of hopeful light, but again, be super careful. Processing volume trend, anything noteworthy there?
Well, for me, I extend this chart out for so many years just as a reminder of back in 2018, how many more petitions they were processing. They were getting through 5,000 forms a quarter back in 2018. And then it dropped off when they had some leadership changes at IPO. Then it got even worse during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then there was that nice upward trend up till 2024, and I was excited we were getting back to the good old days. And then it dropped again, and then we were starting to go up again in early 2025, and then in the most recent thing, it dropped again. What the colors represent on these are the different forms. So I represent all the forms on this chart just so that we can kind of get a sense of where the trends are going. The blue line represents pre-RIA I-526. And so in the past, that was where most of their processing activity was located, on those I-526 filed before 2022. And those I-526, they're almost done processing them. You can see that blue shaded is going down and down. So I kept expecting, since they have fewer examiners who are working on these pre-RIA I-526, those examiners are going to be moved over, and we're going to see
Right. And
I-526E
the set
volumes and
aside.
I-956F volumes really jumping up, and
Yeah.
that hasn't happened.
Right.
One thing that is positive is I-829, which is shaded green in this chart.
Mm-hmm.
I-829 volumes have increased over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
they're holding
Mm-hmm.
steady.
Mm-hmm.
So the real issue is that the old legacy I-526, the volumes are way down, but the
Mm-hmm.
I-526E, the volumes haven't increased that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is half of the story, at least, behind the fact that we don't have dates in the visa bulletin yet for
Mm-hmm.
rural and high unemployment. It's just they're not approving that many petitions. And when
Mm-hmm.
they don't approve petitions, there aren't qualified visa applicants who can crowd out for visas, so they don't put a date in the bulletin.
Right.
Of course, the other half of the story is that they not only have to have applicants, but they actually have to be issuing visas. And it's a question mark in my mind, especially in consular processing, if they're actually issuing those rural and high unemployment visas, because last year they were at such a low volume, and this year they're
Mm-hmm.
just not reporting what they're doing. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's happening there.
No. All right. How about this? What's this showing us? I-526E processing volume by receipts by TEA category and country. I refer to the words and numbers, but tell us what
Oh, what the picture there is, I was
yeah.
just that the blue line is indicating what's been the volume of receipts for I-526E. And so
Mm-hmm.
this shows me that it kind
Gotcha.
of held steady in 2025. There wasn't a big surge. There wasn't a big dip. It was, around 1,600 a quarter,
Mm-hmm.
steady through the year. As far as the volume of approvals and denials, that jumped up finally in 2025. Until 2025, they were, just processing less than 100 petitions a month. And then in later 2025, those volumes started to go up to some extent. So
Yeah.
there's more
Yeah.
volume there. But at the
Got
same
it.
time, I really
Then
wish the most recent 2026 line had continued that nice upward trend, and instead they had another dip.
it is a dip. It is for sure a dip, and this is where we see those denials. Okay.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. Super helpful. This I think I mean, this is what like I gravitate to and what just like, wow. I mean, look at this, Suzanne. India demand has now exceeded China. I think this is the first time ever.
That is during that period, and then also even more notably, if you compare the percentages on rural versus high unemployment, you can
Mm-hmm.
see the demand for rural really surged ahead overall, past high unemployment, and particularly driven by demand from India, as you can see the biggest number on this. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
but to China as well. Overwhelmingly more Chinese invested in rural projects than in high unemployment projects during that
Yeah.
period.
And I don't think that's going to change, right? Because we've had that policy announcement from USCIS on the processing protocol. So the order is 956F approval, then rural, then we'll see if there is availability for anything else.
Yeah, although what I read between the lines on that is
Hmm.
that they're going to, it says rural until we've processed enough rural petitions for the number of visas. But
Hmm.
the thing is that up until now, well, we only know approval data by TEA category through the middle of last year. But through the middle of last year, 75% of their processing had been in rural and only 25% in high unemployment,
Hmm.
which would result in them having enough applicants for all the rural visas, but not enough applicants for all the high unemployment visas. So if
Hmm.
the Immigration Service wanted an excuse to dismiss mandamus on rural actions and say, we're going to go ahead and process more high unemployment cases, this would be their excuse, because they need to process more high unemployment in order to even
Right.
have enough applicants for available high unemployment visas.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think it's possible that the outcome of that announcement will be that they will process a higher volume of high unemployment petitions than they have up until
Hmm.
now,
Hmm. Okay.
or have an excuse for processing fewer rural than they processed before, maybe.
Yeah. I guess I'm not seeing the latter. I mean, I love your interpretation. I hope that's the case. I must say, we're not seeing that. We're not seeing any indication of any upside to HUA petitions long in queue.
Hmm.
Now that announcement is only about 3 months old or so, so I guess we shall see. But yeah, I mean, I think there is certainly an imbalance in terms of the processing times, and this does reflect that.
Yeah,
Um,
although again, this table here is not showing anything about processing. This is only showing receipts, petition
Receipts
receipts
in,
during the
yeah,
period.
but the demand, I think, is it is driven by a lot of it is driven by processing times of 526Es. Now, I mean, as we cruise into visa backlog mode, and yet no, to answer your questions in advance, we don't know when we're going to have those cutoffs, and we don't know which is going to be first, but they are coming for sure. And when they do, I mean that's going to that is going to be taken by some to equal the playing field, because everybody will be waiting, and then we'll be talking about estimating, approximately how long a wait in each. And this is a topic definitely for another day. But Suzanne, I think you and I both agree eventually the lines may merge, which will get very, very interesting. But yeah, so anyway, that's that. Lots of interesting stuff and questions. How about this? What is this showing us?
This is just showing the aggregate total I-526E petitions that have been filed since 2022 up into
Mhm.
December 2025. And the
Yeah,
reason why I really want to highlight the all-time filings is just that due to the low volume of visa issuance to date, most of these people are still in the process.
yeah,
And so someone who's thinking about, I'm filing I-526E today from this country or in this category, what am I looking at as far
yeah,
as the number of people queued up? And
right,
it's this table looking at these sheer numbers that makes me think we are past the point of just relying on the set aside visas,
right.
because
Oh, for sure.
the set
Yeah,
aside is what 32% of total visas, around 3,000 visas a
yeah,
year. When
yeah.
you have 16,000
Mhm.
investors,
Times
that's
2.5.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
at over 30,000
right,
applicants. If it's
right.
over 30,000 applicants, they are not going to all sit there and wait for just 3,000 visas a year.
No, 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 no,
They're,
no.
they're
I
going to be
mean,
looking at all the visas for which they may potentially for which they qualify, including that 68% that are in the unreserved
that's the
category.
thing. That's the right, exactly. So really, we have to wait for the unreserved to clear, which is a reason certainly to welcome that, the band of blue staying high. And I do think those are being chunked through. We used all the available visas in EB-5 in fiscal 2025. The State Department said there's unavailability for Indian EB-5 investors and unreserved. They're all capped out. So those cases, the unreserved pre-RIA cases, are being chunked through. We just desperately need to clear them out so that we have that 68% available.
Yeah, the visa bulletin announcement that they had maxed out India visa
Yeah,
availability for this year in unreserved was very good news for me, because
yeah,
this year has an unusually high limit. So that could
right.
potentially be
Yes,
over 1,000 Indians that got EB-5 unreserved visas. And
yes,
it appears from old data reports that at the start of this year, there probably were only about 1,500 pre-RIA Indians in line. So it could be that most of them are now matched with visas, and maybe the rest
yes.
will get cleared out next year. So
I
that's good news as far as moving the line along
agreed. I
generally.
think that is yet another bright light. I truly, truly do. And I mean, Mumbai, I mean, I do hear a lot of complaints, but I mean, Mumbai must be, chugging along, issuing those pre-RIA B5 visas. If only
Yeah,
we had data.
I don't know if you were hearing anything about Guangzhou, but I'm also very curious to know it's happening there, because another nice sign on the data sign is that big chart A movement for China in the July visa bulletin. That is a big jump considering the filing surges that happen within those dates. And so I'm hoping that means that Guangzhou is doing well with
Yes, me
visa
too.
issuance this year.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's a I mean, are we now at where we were? We're not quite at where we were in February of 2025, right? Or was it April of 2025 when we had the 2-year retrogression? I don't think we're quite there. I don't think we're quite there, but close.
Yeah, well, in the July, they moved it up to December 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And because 2016 had a big filing surge between July and December,
Yeah,
that is a ton of dates to be moving
yeah,
over.
yeah.
So
July 2016. Yes.
they were at July 2016 and March 25, and now they're at December 2016.
So we've cleared it.
Well, I don't count on it being cleared, but they're moving forward through those dates much more quickly than I would have expected.
Yeah.
So between
So
July and
good
September
job.
2016 alone, there were over 5,000 Chinese who filed I-526. So one would think it would take a long
Yes.
time to
But
issue visas to those
10,000.
10,000 people, but they're moving the dates as if they're really moving through that backlog.
It's hard to complain. I mean, I don't know. Mumbai, you get a gold star. Guangzhou, you get a gold star, right?
The rest of the world, you get negative stars.
Rest of the world, we don't know what's going on with you, but you've got to buckle in for increased demand, you know?
That is
Um,
another interesting thing looking at this chart, is just to zero in on how many people are there in rest of the world.
right. That was the other thing for me.
Yeah.
Like, look at that, 25%. It's surging. That is more than meaningful.
And also just thinking about if they can take enough visas that they would pressure China and India down to the 7%. In
Yeah.
high unemployment, that's definitely true. In rural, they are not as overwhelming the maximum number of visas that they could take.
Yes,
But it
yes,
is
yes.
important to look at.
Yeah, yep. All right. Okay. Post-RIA directs, we touched on that. Legacy 526 and 829 processing. Really quickly, what is this showing us?
The columns there are just volume of I-829 processing. So
Okay.
it's illustrating there that 2024, 2025, the volumes are up quite a bit from
Yeah.
the numbers they were before, which
Yeah.
and then the
Right. Which
green
we talked
line
about
there
before.
is receipts.
Yeah.
And I-829 receipts are a little bit weird. They were really low in 2 years after the COVID-19 pandemic, just because
Mhm.
it was an unusual number of people who obtained conditional residence during that period. So
Yes.
2 years later, there's going to
Right.
be a lower
Yeah.
number of people filing I-829.
Right.
But what's nice about this is that the columns are intersecting the line. So that means that with their processing volumes, they're keeping up with receipt numbers. So that means at least the I-829 backlog is not growing.
That's good. That's really, really good. I mean, 829s were kind of really a mess just a few years ago. So this is a
Yeah.
huge improvement.
But before
Gold
you
star.
scroll on from that chart, look at the
Yeah.
little yellow dots. The
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
yellow
Yeah.
dots are marking the median processing time that's reported. And the
Uh-huh.
median processing time is also gone way down. But
Mm.
one thing that tells me is that they're not doing first in, first out on I-829, because there
Mm-hmm.
are a ton of I-829 pending, and they must have been
Oh,
pending for
uh-huh.
longer than 10 months. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact the median
Mm-hmm.
processing time is so low tells me they've been kind of disproportionately picking out recent
That's
cases to
very, very
adjudicate.
interesting. That affirms our anecdotal experience. We're like, huh, now that was lightning quick, relatively speaking. And yet, yeah, and it's time for another it's for another discussion. But yeah, I do think it makes sense to group by project approvals and
Mm.
site visits. So once those for post-RIA cases. But for both, once the project job creation documents are approved, then like for, your 956Fs and pre-RIA project exemplar approvals, then it does make sense to kind of chunk through associated petitions. All right, 485 update really quickly, or maybe not. I mean, we reserved an hour. So yeah, what do you find most interesting about the 485 stats?
The table that you're looking at right now is actually a report of total visas in fiscal 2025. They reported number of status adjustments, and then new arrivals is more or less equivalent to consular processing. New arrivals means people who are entering the United States on their consular visas.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that is interesting to me is just looking at the total number of visas for fiscal 2025, or total number of new permanent residents or new conditional residents, including status adjustments to EB-5 and new arrivals at 15,000. So that's a good number. I know that unreserved, the limit was around 11,000 last year. So this is higher than 11,000. So that is giving me some optimism that over 3,000 set-aside visas must have been issued and used in 2025, which
Right.
is not as bad as it could have been.
No, I mean, like I said, I mean, it reportedly all EB-5s, including the extra ones, were used in fiscal 2025. So, right?
All unreserved, not
Not the
I
set-aside,
haven't
right.
heard any statement that the set-aside visas were all used.
Unreserved. The unreserveds were all used.
Yeah, I put, including the set-asides, there were over 18,000 EB-5 visas last year. So there are definitely set-aside visas that weren't used.
I mean, if I had to choose between chunking through the unreserved, like we did in 2025, versus chunking through our set asides, I would say it's more, I mean, because it's a zero-sum game. We have, a limited amount of agency resources. I think that's money in the bank. I mean, chunk through the unreserved, then we open up the 68%.
Yeah, well, I mean, ideally, I would like them to use
Am I
all the
simplifying?
visas, but if they feel like we can only manage to issue 15,000 EB-5 visas, it's definitely fair that they maximize the number to the oldest priority date.
And that is I mean, essentially that is the answer. I mean, it's not, they can't just, it's not person for, it's not by, there are limited resources. And so how best to allocate. So I don't know. I'm not displeased with that.
Yeah. And also I should emphasize that what is in the data report is that first table, just
this one here.
Yeah, what's in the data report is up above. And then what's down below is more estimates and inferences. So the number of EB-5 visas available, this is what I just personally calculated based on my understanding of how many visas rolled over. And then as far as the distribution of that 15,000 visas, how that distributed between unreserved and set aside, that's just totally my guess. Because I'm guessing that they issued the maximum number of unreserved visas since there was an announcement to that effect, and then inferring that, okay, they must have issued this many set aside.
I mean, State Department will publish that number.
Yes, they should have published it already.
I agree.
The annual report is supposed to be out already, but it's not out as of today.
Okay. All right. That's awesome and super helpful. Status adjustment in fiscal 2026 data through February. So here are the stats, not broken out by preference category, but by employment-based, family-based, refugee, asylum.
Yeah, the reason why I did this table is that I'm just thinking when they came out with that scary adjustment of status memo, I thought, are they giving themselves covering for the fact that they're already not issuing I-485s? And also, is there a difference between how they're treating employment-based versus the other categories
Uh-huh.
that are using I-485.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so on this table, I just slotted in the data that was most recent as that time for February 26th. And then I thought,
Hmm.
let's just compare this, how many visas
Yeah.
they issued in 26 to previous years to see if
Yeah.
the current visa issuance is normal.
Okay,
And
so like you compared with the prior year, but what I wanted to do, but it didn't have
mhm,
time to do the math, was what is the percentage of denials? Like what does that pencil out to? I mean, so you have much higher denial rate in family-based. Am I correct? I mean, like,
uh, well,
right?
yeah,
So you
I
got
should
to,
have calculated the denial rate. I didn't do
yeah.
that. But
Well, we can do
what,
it
what
right
I
now.
what jumped out to me is that employment-based, at least as of February, did not look like it was the major target of the hit because
Yeah.
its total volumes were similar to and even a little higher than in that
Ooh.
same month in previous years. Denials were actually lower than that same month in previous years. Whereas if you go over to refugee and asylum, boom, they're all of a sudden doing almost nothing compared to the
Uh-huh.
volumes they did in previous years, plus a lot of denials.
Okay. All right, I'm just seconds away. Wait a minute. No, it's assuming I typed this in correctly. 239 plus.
This particular report is now available for March and April as well. So
Okay.
I haven't done an analysis of those months yet, but I was curious to throw those numbers into it in Excel and just see how the trend looks within 2026.
Ooh, interesting. This is, I mean, somebody has got to double check my arithmetic, but I'm getting 14% denial rate for employment based and 6.6% denial rate. Is that correct? For family based. That is completely the opposite of what I would have predicted.
Yeah,
So
and
anyway,
again, this is just a spot
this,
comparison of 1 month.
yes,
So
exactly.
it's
Exactly, exactly. All right. So, questions. There was a question about it relating to the May 22nd AOS memo. Has anybody gotten any approvals? We have not. Our last 485 approval was May 7th. But they were coming in like regularly all 2026. So, would we classify this as a pause? Yeah, I think so. From May 7th through to June 24th. I think we probably would. But so yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed and breaths held. Suzanne, are you ready for a couple questions?
sure.
All right, so do you expect a meaningful late fiscal year adjudication surge for EB-5 adjustment cases this summer?
Uh, that happened last year, according to the data report we were looking at up above, and
Yeah,
that's typical, right?
it is. It is. And I'll tell you, I have had heroic emails and have there also even been from examiners going, we're missing photos, send them in right away as soon as possible. So again, like Silver Star, the effort is being made to chunk through. Yes. Chinese post-RIA demand is heavily concentrated in rural, approximately 2 to 1 over HUA by our read. Everyone assumes rural 20% versus HUA 10% means very different weight lines. Not necessarily, but for Chinese investors capped at 7% per country within each pool, how much does that 2x set aside difference actually translate into a real gap in China's rural versus HUA priority dates? I think they mean wait times.
Right. Yeah, when I'm looking at the sheer numbers in rural and high unemployment, I am thinking at this point the 10% versus the 20% doesn't make as much difference as 10 and 20% versus 68%, which is the number of visas in unreserved. So what I'm really, I think the thing that's going to make the biggest difference is when is the China backlog of pre-2022 priority dates going to be finished getting unreserved visas such that the excess demand in rural and high unemployment can start overflowing there, because that is thousands of visas a year that are left on the table by rest of the world and unreserved. Whereas within rural and high unemployment, if everyone just stays in their category, there are enough rest of the world applicants there to compress China and India down to 7%. And if you're getting visas issued at a rate of 140 a year or 70 a year, just 7% in these tiny categories, you wait forever.
Yeah, it's really bad, we really, really need to focus on clearing the unreserved. Okay, hi, for employment-based 14% denial rate, was that related to 52060? This is employment-based for all the employment-based categories in Suzanne's data. So it's EB1, EB2, EB3, EB5. I don't know, EB4 is technically in employment-based, so I guess, but there aren't that many EB4s, special immigrant juveniles and religious workers. So yeah, all the I-140s and 526Es and 526s.
Yeah, for approvals and denials, they don't publish the EB-5 specific data there. For EB-5 specifically, they just do monthly inventory reports. So I can kind of guess by lining up the inventory reports how many approvals and denials there were in a period, but it's just a guess.
Yeah. Suzanne, some parting thoughts and feelings. I want to know your feelings. What are you feeling?
Well, at this, I'd rather ask you, I'm curious if there were any takeaways you had from the AILA conference, because I think that kind of gave you an overall view of what people generally are most concerned about.
I mean, these are
or
attorneys.
most excited about.
Yeah, I mean, recently been to China, Shanghai, number of cities in May. Recently went to IIUSA's industry forum in DC also in May, and just got back from San Diego's AILA conference in June. My sense, Suzanne, is that like there's this holding breath kind of feeling. It's like, you know, and it's like for all these things, it's like, okay, so what does grandfathering mean? You know, are we going to have, when's the backlog going to happen? You know, what do these, you know, increasing denials mean? You know, I got an SDRFE, you know, what do I do? Yeah, there's just and then in the middle of it, you know, definitely a surge in interest, and you know, like, is this the time? And it feels like it's now or never. It's a unique time, I would say, in EB-5, because I've experienced like this, you know, unbelievable, like, oh my gosh, you know, the surge is uncontrolled surge, and also, you know, complete like the trough, right? Yeah. And then like things getting like this excitement of like starting again, 2022, 2023, and then just like sort of absorbing all the data that comes in and like trying to understand it all and how it maps to the new landscape. Now it just sort of is this weird, like maybe it's the eye of the storm. Maybe
yeah, that's a good description.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to flip it back to you, girl. So give me something.
I guess both with the direct EB-5 investors that I'm working with on their projects, and then the prospective EB-5 investors that I talk to with timing questions, it's individually, the EB-5 investors, I feel like these are people that we're so privileged to have in the US. It's I think it's wonderful that there's this category that maybe allows them to continue to stay. The projects that I'm working with, really cool projects. I love the fact that people are developing these businesses. So I see a lot of the really good potential side of EB-5. And then at the same time, I spent all this time looking at spreadsheets and at numbers that terrify me as far as what we're looking at, as far as the number of people who are moving forward, hopefully in hope of visas, the number of visas available, all of the mess in how visas get allocated, and that part is concerning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's this sort of Janus, two-headed quality to this moment. It's just very, very, very interesting. Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that you're excited about the projects you're working on. I mean, that's really exciting. What this program can do. I think we've only just scratched the surface of what it could do. I
Right.
mean, the confluence of the money, the job creation, the economy, and the things that we as a world society need. It's vast. And could we harness this incredible tool to help?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can. All right. So, on that beautiful note, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Suzanne, for joining. Love
It's
you
a pleasure to
dearly.
speak with you.
See you soon. See you next time, everyone. Bye bye.